This is the Kowloon Walled City. Imagine a place where all buildings were merged into a single block and so densely packed that sunlight barely touches the ground. A city within a city, where people flocked in to look for cheap housing and subsequently established a thriving community that lasted for decades. This city was home to over tens of thousands of people, packed into just 6.4 acres of land, making it the most densely populated place in human history. But to the residents who lived there, what was life really like? What was the history behind this city? Join us as we are going to delve into the history of Kowloon Walled City. The history of Kowloon Walled City dates back to the Song Dynasty, when a military outpost was constructed to manage salt trade in the area. Little took place for hundreds of years afterward, although 30 guards were stationed there in 1668. A small coastal fort was established around 1810 after Chinese forces abandoned Tung Lung Fort, also known as Fat Tong Port. During this period, commodities exported from China like tea, silk, and porcelain were in hot demand in European countries like Great Britain. Despite this, the Chinese had little need for Western commodities, and this undoubtedly created an imbalance in trade between the two countries. This perceived imbalance meant that Chinese goods could often only be purchased in exchange for precious metals. To solve the trade imbalance, the British exported a large quantity of opium from India. It was also one of the few commodities Chinese was interested in, and this became a significant source of revenue for the British Empire, albeit illegally. This tactic was effective from the British, as it later triggered an addiction epidemic in Chinese populace and posed a growing source of concern to Qing Dynasty as they were facing a serious health crisis caused by the opium trade. By the late 1830s, social relations between the British and Chinese had grown tense. Rejecting demands to legalize and legitimize the opium trade, Emperor Daoguang directed Commissioner Lin Zexu in 1839 to take decisive measures to destroy illegal opium stockpiles and halted all foreign trade. This action later prompted the British to declare a war on China, a military response that was known as the First Opium War. After an initial British victory and continuation of hostilities, Hong Kong Island was formally ceded by the Chinese through the 1842 Treaty of Nanking. Relations between both empires remained hostile, however, and the expectation that the British would re-engage in conflict led the Chinese to fortify the region. It was in this context that the walled city's construction began in 1846, with completion in 1847. The walled city stood largely in this physical form until its demolition by the Japanese in 1941 during their invasion and occupation of Hong Kong. Continuing tensions led to another military escalation, resulting in the Second Opium War, where the Qing, once again forcefully defeated, were coerced to lease the Kowloon Peninsula and Stonecutters Island via the 1860 Convention of Peking. This newly acquired territory was only a few kilometers from the walled city. The last gross colonial territorial expansion by the British in the region came in 1898, which saw the new territories leased via the Second Convention of Peking, also known as the Convention for the Extension of Hong Kong Territory. The British now controlled an area expanding well beyond the walled city. As part of the negotiations, however, the British initially agreed that the walled city would continue to stay under the governance of Chinese authority, making it a Chinese enclave within the territories of the British in 99 years. During World War II, Imperial Japan invaded China and the Indochina region. Hong Kong was one of the regions that was occupied by the Japanese and used it as a military base. The stone wall that surrounds the city was demolished and repurposed as building materials for the construction of military infrastructures, including the Kai Tak airport extension. The end of World War II witnessed the return of British control on Hong Kong. In addition, massive waves of refugees from mainland China during the Cultural Revolution In the 1960s, searching for cheap housing was the main driving factor for the growth of the walled city. In 1984, after years of negotiations between Great Britain and China, Great Britain finally agreed to hand over Hong Kong back to China. And finally, in 1997 marked the expiration of the British's lease on the territory. The colony became a focal point for negotiations between the UK and China, as both the Chinese and British made breakthroughs to resolve any disputes related to the walled city's future. The two countries unanimously decided that the walled city would be demolished due to the risks of fire-related accident and the deteriorated structural conditions for all of the buildings within the walled city, although this decision was met with the objection from the city's residents. Demolition project began in 1993, and this event marked the end of Kowloon Walled City. Kowloon Walled City's population in its early days fluctuated greatly between 0 and a few hundred. However, after the end of World War II, the figure dramatically increased due to the massive influx of refugees looking for cheap housing and accommodation. However, there is no accurate population information available for much of the walled city's later existence. Official census numbers estimated the walled city's population at 10,004 in 1971 and 14,617 in 1981. In 1987, the government started a survey on the Kowloon Walled City's population, and the result provided a clearer result. An estimated 33,000 people resided within the walled city. Based on this survey, the walled city had a population density of approximately 1,255,000 inhabitants per square kilometer. Due to the harsh living conditions, residents formed a tightly knit community, helping one another endure various hardships. Within families, women often handled household chores within families, while elderly women looked after their grandkids and other nearby children. Particularly for those who lived on higher floors, the city's rooftops served as significant meeting spots where children frequented there as their playground, and adults often used this to relax. The government attempted to evacuate the residents several times, but such an effort was met with threats and resistance from the locals. And worse, the locals even threatened to spark a diplomatic incident. Due to the lack of government presence, the city was a hotbed of criminal activity where opium dens, heroin stands, brothels, and dog restaurants rapidly popped up in the 50s and 60s. And in the later years, the criminal activities even expanded further into human trafficking. All of this happened since police usually turned a blind eye to the illegal businesses that took place there. Although the city was free from laws of Hong Kong, power structure still existed in this place, with the triad criminal gangs. Although businesses didn't have to pay tax, they still were forced to pay protection money to these criminal gangs. But that all changed in the 70s, when a wave of anti-corruption campaigns removed most criminal elements in the authorities. Although the city slowly fades away into memory, the city itself has become a source of inspiration in popular culture, particularly in fictional settings where the architectural style of the city and its iconic narrow pathway can be seen in video games and movies. It is always associated with a dystopian future where criminal gangs are rampant, despite the fact that the city may not give a positive impression to outside visitors. By exploring the life of the people living there, they found that the city is not as it looked from the outside. One can send a handwritten letter to someone living in the city, and the letter would be delivered to the receiver just fine. And the people who settled here began to build their own families, raised children, and even established their own business. Although the Kowloon Walled City may no longer exist, its legacy lives on in the stories of resilience, ingenuity, and survival. From its chaotic corridors to its vibrant community, it stood as a testament to the human spirit in the face of adversity. Thank you for joining us on this journey into one of history's most extraordinary urban experiments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating explorations into forgotten places and untold stories. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What intrigued you most about the Kowloon Walled City?